ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, this is called it used to be called the graveyard session, but then it implied waking up the dead. That's rude. So it's now called the twilight session. My job is to wake you up because I'm standing between you and your tea or coffee. So I have a question for you, for the audience. How many of you believe that global warming is real? Show of hands. Okay. How many of you believe that we still have a chance to turn the tide and not reach the tipping point? Not so many hands back there. Okay, we need to find out why you don't believe, because that's a very important issue to explore for financing. So just a little bit of digression here. I started my career in the oil and gas sector. I'm a chemical engineer. My job was to quantify the risk of major accidents and hazards and quantify the financing cost of accidents and safety. And one day, one eminent economist told me, human beings have got it all wrong. We call the economy an economy. It means reduction. If you look in the dictionary, the word economy means to economize, to reduce. But we actually use it as our wealth, growing the economy. He said to me that the Stone Age ended not because we ran out of stones, and the fossil fuel age will end not because we run out of fossil fuel, but because we can't afford to finance the negative impact of it. And that was when I changed my job. And I started working on SDG. So that was 1992 in Rio. But you know, we were working on Agenda 21. And Agenda 21 was all about reaching the 21st century in a sustainable development capability, carbon neutral. Here we are in the 21st century, and actually we haven't achieved it at all. By the latest statistics, 86% of the world's energy is still fossil fuel based. 14% is renewable energy, of which 6% is hydro. So unfortunately, we missed our chance simply because a lot of people, a lot of people do not believe climate change is real, and they don't believe that we are going to get warmer and therefore we are going to go towards extinction. Now, in the UK, where I live in London, we are experiencing record temperatures. Mr. Amitabh Kant said it very well. We are getting towards the non-returnable tipping point of 3 degrees. The result of that is the UK is heating up. And a very visible result of that is that our electric buses are breaking down. And all along the bus routes, you have abandoned buses in London, where I live. And people have started disbelieving electrification for EV. They say, oh, electric buses don't work. The reason they don't work is because they're not fit for purpose. They're not made in an atmosphere that they're going to operate in. So that's a key thing to remember. I think the previous panel was very good on that. They talked about fit for purpose, making sure that local elements are taken into account. Now, I'm supposed to be talking about financing, and here I am talking about all these other factors, because all these other factors really affect what financing is going to do for you. We don't believe, as a rule, in the financial sector, and I'm a financial sector person. I moved to investment banking. I worked for Goldman Sachs. I worked for Solomon Brothers. I worked for Citigroup, because we couldn't make the financier believe that you didn't have to worry about the return on investment when the world was about to end. Because we would be dead, but we would be very, very rich. So the choice would have been between our to these kinds of investing. And the answer is we can't. We can't afford that. So if you go back, I know you're trying to hurry me up, but I haven't finished with my first slide, so please go back. So you see that there's a lot of new language. We use a lot of jargon. You know, how many of you are actually familiar with the new jargon that we use? We talk about climate neutral. We talk about climate warriors. we talk about offsetting, we talk about compensating. All of these are parameters that are actually used in financing discussions. But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters to a financier is the return on investment. And if the return on investment on decarbonization investment isn't good enough, they will find an excuse why that investment isn't necessary. So I specialize in startup scale-up, IT commercialization and scale-up. Marian Bocek, who sat over there, he set up a startup in Europe to make batteries. And he asked me to come and help because I've known him for a long time. And I told him 95% of startups fail. Failure rate in startups is very high. It's because the startup guy goes with a passion to create technology, but doesn't have the necessary financial and manufacturing expertise to scale up the idea. And that's where the startup fails. So we've worked for the last 3 years on creating startups that scale up, and I'll use that as a case study for later on. For now, I just want to leave you with a few thoughts about where the problem is going to be solved if you really want to solve it. That chart tells you that 87% of the issue is in energy-related sector. And I want to tell you that it's not necessarily all in the generation side. It's actually transmission and distribution. We have to get away from fixed landlines for transmission and distribution. That's where the problem is. The grid controls you. The tail is wagging the dog. We got rid of that problem by chance when it became for telecommunications. The world was run by landlines, landline telephony. And without us knowing, without governments knowing, so they couldn't regulate it and they couldn't delay it, mobile telephony happened and the world changed. We were free of landlines. And mobile telephony, and especially the pay-as-you-go prepaid concept, made the base of the pyramid. People without a bank account are the people that I call the base of the pyramid, made those people consumers because they were able to get a phone and they were able to use mobile money to be part of the wider consuming society. And I think if we want to save the world, the first thing we need to consider is how to free ourselves from the 19th century setup of fixed transmission and distribution systems. We really need to invest in smart grids. And we really need to look at self-generation. So for the factories that GIB, the Goshen InoBat batteries joint venture is getting involved in, we advocate self-generation and smart grid for own consumption. And that's a really critical part of the solution, which gets us back to the question of which batteries will save the world first. The question is, do we need electricity first or do we need to be mobile? You can't be mobile in the dark. You need electricity first. And to be able to bring down the carbon footprint, you actually need green energy to feed all these systems. So it's a no-brainer that we all need energy storage systems more than we need to have a EV car or two-wheeler or three-wheeler. And it would be a great idea if you could solve both problems at the same time. So I'm a great advocate of removable batteries for two-wheelers and three-wheelers that could also help you light up your home if you're living in a rural area. Remember, over 1 billion people live without access to electricity. So if you want to create consumers of the future, we have to find a way of giving them, first of all, access to electricity. 110 trillion will solve the problem. Everybody thinks that's a lot of money. It's not, you know, it's not a lot of money. It's 1.3% of the GDP. And if you think about it, India is nearly 5 times the population of the United States. India has generation capacity that's almost a fifth of generation capacity of the United States. These numbers are inversely related. So India is going to have to have a lot of generation capacity and distribution capacity to create global parity. The problem we face in the world today with all the disturbance, all the uncertainty, all the issues that we have is to do with unparity, social unparity. Social justice. Why should somebody have a car and tell me that I can't drive a car? Why should somebody have so much electricity and tell me I can't have electricity? So the social unparity is what we need to solve. And to solve it, we have to collectively agree that 1.3% of the global GDP is not a lot of money. But the most important thing that we all forget is time value of money. It means the rate of birth of babies is much faster than the rate of creation of new generation. You have to be faster because people make a lot more babies than you're able to make solar and wind farms, and that's why the number never goes down, because there are more people added to the population. It's always over 1 billion people without access to electricity. So somehow we need to be faster. And how to be faster is to make financiers and investors not be so worried about losing money. You can't take the money with you when the world ends and we all fry. So don't worry so much about it not giving you 30% return on your investment. R&D is a risky business. You all talked about R&D and how important R&D is. Guess what? That's the biggest fear of investing funds. They don't want to invest in R&D. They want somebody else to de-risk it. So who's going to de-risk it? Who's going to create an investment that's safe and ticks all the boxes? I guess it's all of you. Now you can move. I'm done with this slide. Oh, okay. So back to the topic now. All the stuff I said before had nothing to do with what I was supposed to talk about. I was supposed to talk about this. And what are the kinds of financing schemes that are available? And remember, startups fail not because they have bad technology, but because they don't have the additional financial engineering, manufacturing know-how, and delivery capability. Without those things, no matter how good your idea is, you're going to fail. So low-interest loans and public-private partnerships and leasing schemes create the demand, because Stephen talked about ability to manufacture, but ability to buy the product. So up there is what creates the demand, and those are stimuli that are typically coming from governments and funding institutions globally, World Bank, for example, to enable consumers to buy. Now, everybody, honestly, please think about giving up this phrase, vertical integration. It's circular integration. Unless you're a closed loop, unless you're circular integrated, it's not going to be helping you very much. So vertical integration is a thing of the past, I think. So the Holy Grail is this circular economy. But actually, the biggest Holy Grail is localized value chains, not having to transport the material. Guess what? Europeans and Americans, in my experience, they don't like working in manufacturing and heavy industry. They just don't like those jobs. Trying to make manufacturing in Europe work cost effectively will take a lot of effort, because that passion of creation goes only as far as creating the new idea. It was very interesting for me to see all the robots in the factories are German in Chinese factories. The AI-driven machinery and all the latest equipment is German, but the Chinese companies don't even think twice about buying them. They even went out and bought the company that makes the robots, because they know that they have to invest and put a lot of money in to acquire the know-how that gives them the time value of money. Being right time to the market and being the right time to invest. If you're even a week late in your calculations, when you're calculating the time value of money, it throws out your business plan out of whack. So at the bottom is basically the supply chain, funding the value chain. These are the creation of opportunities. That's the creation of market and the demand. And we realized in Europe, through the work that we did with InoBat and to a lesser extent with the EU, we realized we couldn't do it without the Chinese. So instead of trying to compete with the Chinese and all the fancy words that we were using at the time of COVID, you know, autonomy of supply, creating security of independence from China. I mean, God, you know, the result was British Volt, Northvolt, Freyr, Vercor, all these other AES, all these other European companies that are struggling to get up to scale. It works in the laboratory, but it doesn't scale up. So we were lucky. We collided in time with Goshen at the right time. They were looking for a partner in Europe, and we were looking for a partner that was what I call investment grade. And Goshen, in all our calculations, is the most investment grade player in the top 10 battery sector. I usually have a little crystal ball, and I kind of tell you that we are at the same moment in time that I experienced, and most of you would have experienced, in the mobile telephony sector. Remember the time there was Nokia, Motorola, BlackBerry, Sony, Ericsson, all those other names. And then you blinked an eye, and then there was Apple and Samsung, right? And then, after a while, it's now this Chinese phone that Tobias likes very much. Show me, okay. So what's my point? My point is the battery sector, with its top 10, is at that inflection point. You have a monopoly with CATL, but the monopoly doesn't necessarily have the best technology. It just happens to have been at the right place at the right time and expanded very fast, and that is not always a good thing. So my bet, I've got 3 bets of the survivors of the battery sector. Obviously, the top one is Goshen. That's why we are together. I'm not going to tell you about the other 2 because I don't want to be, you know, causing a rush in trying to do something. But okay, I think one of the things that's up for, yeah. So basically, the biggest opportunity for funding your projects to enable you with taking the benefit of time value of money is a green bond. So, and also to find partner to tech license you into faster enablement. When I said to Stephen, you've got to help me with the tech licensing with Amar Raja, he said, Tara, you're asking me to go to my board, to Volkswagen and my own board, and say, we want to enable a competitor in India to become a #1 battery maker within 5 years. I said, yeah, that's what I'm asking you to do. He said, do you know how difficult that is? It's not like an OEM. It's not like a, you know, somebody in China or even in Europe. It's actually a battery maker, and it's actually in India. I said, if we achieve that, we are really set up for success. And I'm delighted that it happened. So next slide, please. And I want to use it as a case study to explain to you how these things can be made possible. Okay, so let's say that we can issue a green bond. Let's say that this is the green bond market. And for listed entities, it's a relatively straightforward thing to do. And as you can see, it's a very mature market. And there was a peak issuance in 2021, but the market's kind of coming back again. And I think one of the things we should consider is the size of a green bond and the location of issuance. So we are looking at that. We're looking at that for a portfolio of gigafactories that we're trying to develop. And I want to now show you one of the projects that we did, which is the project that we are here for as the case study. Next slide, please. So the case study I'm going to use is called Project Tiger. Project Tiger is the transaction that was done between GIB, Goshen InoBat Batteries, which is a joint venture between Goshen and InoBat in Slovakia, between Goshen InoBat Batteries and Amar Raja Group. Vikram. So that's Mr. Project Tiger leader. And the Project Tiger was designed by that number 4. Is that Vikram? No, yes. So that's the team. That's the team you need to corner if you want to ask a lot of questions about. Do I now press this, or can somebody go to the next slide? So we started with the concept of circularity. We created this wheel. We call it the Wheel of Fortune, where we tried to find the best allies around the wheel, starting with suppliers, customers, governments, global institutions, investors, and lenders. We typically work with the IFC because of the IFC performance standards, and because once you pass the IFC performance standards, especially on ESG, you're a very bankable company. So we co-developed our project in Serbia with the IFC. And during the Series B of InoBat, we had Rio Tinto invest in InoBat because they own the Jadar mine, the largest lithium mine outside of China, which is based in Serbia. And they were stopped for 3 years by protesters and NGOs. But last 2 weeks ago, the license was reinstated and the mine will start again, which means that our project there will start as well. That's called Project Lion. Governments and global institutions and investors and lenders play a very key role in this alliance partnership. And to issue green bonds, we need to have some kind of institutional support. And the institutional support typically comes from the likes of the World Bank. So Goshen has a project in Morocco. They have a transaction because Morocco is one of the biggest sources of iron phosphate, and they had a very good incentive arrangement with the government of Morocco. And that is enabled by the free trade agreements between Morocco, Europe, and USA. So that's another key issue for India. The secret to success is to make sure that you've ticked all the boxes in each segment of that wheel, especially when it comes to import and export. Because understanding the tariffs and the free trade agreements and what you could actually negotiate by way of dispensations is a very key element of succeeding in your financial model. Next slide, please. So the project that we did with Amar Raja is the first large-scale size of our localization platform. So I'm very excited to be working with Goshen on this localization platform. Each project that you see has an animal name because we try to characterize our projects and our project teams with the national animal of the location. You don't have to take pictures. I see all the pictures out there. You could have these slides. It's okay. We'll share the slides. So these projects are the projects that we are developing right now. And I'm very excited that some of them also collide with the footprint of the Amar Raja Group. So hopefully we can fast-track our time to market even more by making an alliance between GIB and Amar Raja for delivery of these localization platforms. Localization is the second biggest positive driver of decarbonization. The first positive driver of decarbonization is green electricity for manufacturing and supply and running the platform. The second one is localization. If you can create jobs and if you can localize as much of the value chain as possible, that is when you actually achieve the biggest impact on decarbonization, which is we've signed the second one of these. So the second project that we signed is Project Python in Nigeria. That is with the Sovereign Wealth Agency of Nigeria. They are going to create centers for renewable energy feeding their industrial sectors. 7 sectors have been selected, so agribusiness, oil and gas, fertilizer, and a number of others. they will be receiving distributed power, solar, primarily solar distributed power. And the idea is that we would localize for them the assembly of energy storage systems. And GIB was launched at COP28 in December 2023, and the Nigerians who are supported by the World Bank and IRENA were there, and that's how that, Stephen made a very nice speech about if you want to be with the battery sector, start with assembly, and if you want to have battery assembly, start with ESS, don't go for mobility because OEMs take forever to sign a contract. You know, they take, negotiating a contract with an OEM, a few of them in this room who should maybe put their hands up. I mean, sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 years to negotiate a contract with an OEM, and that kind of luxury is interesting. The criteria, what are the criteria for making this work properly? The criteria is basically to make the franchise possible. First of all, there has to be demand. And judging by everything that I've learned from you today, Indian demand is without question more than what anybody can handle in one go. And then strong local partners. So I think we have a very strong local partner in the Amar Raja team. And as much as possible, access to local material, which is an opportunity, an open door for all of you who are in the value chain to come with your materials and with your know-how, with your recycling, and everything else that you can bring to the party. With that, I have to say that I finished, and let's see how many people are awake. Those of you who are awake, can you put your hand up, please? Oh my God, everybody's awake, almost. Thank you very much.